All right, let's cut the crap. You're here because you want to know about a book that promises to help you not die, or at least not die in a pathetic, drawn out way. The book is Outlive, The Science and Art of Longevity, written by Peter Attia, MD, with Bill Gifford. Attia is a doctor who got obsessed with the gap between living longer and living better. This thing was published in 2023 by Harmony Books, an imprint of Random House out of New York. Now, for the mandatory legal throat clearing, translated into plain English. This is an independent summary. It's my take on the author's work. It is absolutely not a substitute for reading the actual book. If you make life-altering decisions based on a 20,000-word summary and end up screwing yourself over, that's your problem. Don't be lazy. If this stuff actually matters to you, buy the damn book and do the real work. 1. Rethinking Medicine. From Reactive to Proactive 1.1. The Failure of Medicine 2.0. Let's get one thing straight. Modern medicine, what Attia calls Medicine 2.0, is a miracle at dealing with fast death. If you get hit by a bus or contract some wild bacterial infection, you're in luck. Doctors will patch you up, pump you full of antibiotics, and have you back on your feet. It's heroic, it's impressive, and it's built entirely around reacting to crises. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. Medicine 2.0 is completely, utterly useless when it comes to slow death. The long, grinding decline that defines the last couple of decades for most people, the chronic diseases that turn your golden years into a joyless slog of pills, pain, and hospital visits. Medicine 2.0 has almost nothing to say about that. It's a system designed to keep you from dying, but it has no strategy for helping you live. Think about it. The whole approach is reactive. You wait until a tumor is big enough to see on a scan. You wait until your arteries are so clogged that you have a heart attack. You wait until your blood sugar is out of control, and then you get a diabetes diagnosis. It's like calling the fire department after your house is already burned to the ground. They'll show up and spray some water on the ashes, but the damage is done. The current model of healthcare is fundamentally a game of whack-a-mole with diseases that have been quietly festering for decades. It's a strategy for managing disaster, not for building a robust, resilient life. Attia shares a gut-punching story about a woman named Edith, a vibrant person who, in her final years, was stripped of her dignity by a series of cascading health failures. She didn't die from one big thing. She was consumed by 1,000 little ones. Her death wasn't a single event, but a slow, agonizing process. And the medical system, for all its technological marvels, could only stand by and manage her symptoms as she faded away. This is the reality Medicine 2.0 has created. A longer lifespan, but a compressed, miserable end-of-life experience. It has extended our expiration date without giving a single thought to the quality of the extra time it has bought us. 1.2. The Dawn of Medicine 3.0. So, if the current system is broken, what's the alternative? Attia proposes a radical shift in thinking, a new framework he calls Medicine 3.0. This isn't just a minor tweak, it's a complete paradigm shift. The goal of Medicine 3.0 is not to extend life at all costs. The goal is to extend health span, the period of your life where you are physically capable and cognitively sharp enough to do the things you love. Seriously, what's the point of living to be 100 if you spend the last 20 years unable to walk, unable to think clearly, and unable to even enjoy a meal? It's a garbage outcome. Medicine 3.0 is about engineering a life that ends with a short, sharp decline, not a long, drawn-out fade. It's about dying on your own terms, still active and engaged, not wasting away in a nursing home. This requires a fundamental change in strategy. Instead of waiting for diseases to manifest, Medicine 3.0 is about going on the offensive. It's about using every tool at our disposal, genetics, blood markers, lifestyle data, you name it, to identify risks decades before they become problems. The core principle is prevention, but not the weak sauce, eat your vegetables prevention you've heard a million times. This is strategic, personalized, aggressive prevention. It's about understanding the battlefield of your own body and waging a targeted war against the specific things most likely to kill you. Attia uses the analogy of a car. Medicine 2.0 is the mechanic you call after you've already crashed. Medicine 3.0 is the Formula One engineering team that fine-tunes every aspect of the car before the race to ensure it performs at its absolute peak and doesn't break down. It's the difference between being a passenger in your own health journey and getting in the damn driver's seat. It's about taking ownership. It means you have to stop outsourcing your health to a doctor you see for 15 minutes once a year and start treating your own body like it's the most complex and important project you'll ever manage. Because it is. 2. The Four Horsemen. The killers we should be fighting. 2.1. Identifying the enemy. If you're going to wage a war, you need to know your enemy. For most of us living in the developed world, the things that will eventually kill us aren't random accidents or exotic viruses. They are a predictable group of chronic diseases that Attia calls the Four Horsemen of the health apocalypse. These are the big ones, the major leagues of slow, miserable death. The four are 3. Atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, strokes, and the like. Basically, your plumbing getting clogged up until something bursts. 4. Cancer, the uncontrolled growth of abnormal cells. 5. Neurodegenerative diseases, the brain-rotting conditions like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, etc. 6. Metabolic dysfunction, a cluster of problems including type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, and obesity. This one is the great enabler, the one that fuels the other 3. Here's the kicker. These 4 groups of diseases account for the overwhelming majority of deaths in people over 50 who don't smoke. They are the final common pathway for most of us. And the most terrifying part is that they don't just show up out of the blue. By the time you get a diagnosis for any of them, the disease process has likely been underway for 10, 20, or even 30 years. Your body has been quietly falling apart while you were busy worrying about your job, your mortgage, and what to watch on Netflix. The core argument of the book is that if you want to extend your health span, your entire strategy must be geared toward preventing the arrival of these 4 horsemen. Everything else is a distraction. The problem with Medicine 2.0 is that it's set up to treat these diseases only when they are in their late, often irreversible stages. Medicine 3.0 aims to stop them before they even get started. 2.2. The case for a long-term strategy. So how do you fight an enemy you can't see? You have to change your timeline. You have to stop thinking about your health in terms of how you feel today and start thinking about it in terms of decades. Attia tells a personal and humbling story that drives this point home. At the peak of his physical fitness, he was a competitive swimmer and cyclist, lean and muscular. He discovered through his own blood tests that he was profoundly unhealthy. He was severely insulin resistant, a condition that put him squarely on the path to type 2 diabetes and heart disease. On the outside, he was the picture of health. On the inside, he was a metabolic train wreck. This is a critical lesson. You can be fit and unhealthy at the same time. You can have a six-pack and still be rotting from the inside out. The metrics that most people use to judge health, your weight on a scale, how you look in the mirror, how fast you can run a 5K, are often meaningless or even misleading. They tell you nothing about the underlying metabolic chaos that could be brewing in your cells. This realization forced Attia to confront a hard truth. His obsession with performance had come at the expense of his long-term health. It was a wake-up call that shattered his own sense of invincibility, and it's a question everyone needs to ask themselves. Are you optimizing for the short-term win, or are you playing the long game? Are you focused on looking good for your beach vacation, or are you focused on being able to chase your great-grandkids around in your 90s? The choice is yours, but don't fool yourself into thinking they're the same thing. Medicine 3.0 demands a long-term strategy. It requires you to make decisions today based not on immediate gratification, but on a vision of the person you want to be in your final decade of life. It's about defining your own centenarian decathlon, the 10 or so physical and cognitive tasks you want to be able to perform at age 100, and then backcasting from there to figure out what you need to be doing right now to make that a reality. It's not about vanity. It's about preserving function and, ultimately, preserving your own freedom. Choose your struggle, the discomfort of discipline now or the profound regret of a life cut short by preventable decay. 3. Heart disease. It's not a plumbing problem. It's a war in your arteries. 3.1. Unlearning everything you know about heart attacks. All right, let's talk about horseman number 1, atherosclerotic disease. This is the stuff that gives you heart attacks and strokes. Most people think of it like a plumbing issue, and your arteries are pipes. Cholesterol is gunk, and eventually the gunk clogs the pipe. Simple, right? It's also completely wrong. This clogged pipe analogy has probably killed more people than we can count because it's a lazy, inaccurate simplification. Here's the truth. Atherosclerosis is not a plumbing problem. It is a chronic inflammatory disease that happens inside the wall of your arteries. It's an immune response gone haywire. Think of it less like a clogged drain and more like a festering wound that never heals. The process begins when certain lipoprotein particles, carrying cholesterol, manage to wiggle their way from your bloodstream into the space behind the delicate inner lining of your artery, the endothelium. Once they're trapped in there, your immune system freaks out. It sees these particles as foreign invaders and mounts a massive attack. It sends in macrophages, the Pac-Men of your immune system, to gobble up the lipoproteins. The problem is they are too damn good at their job. They eat so much cholesterol that they become bloated, dysfunctional foam cells. These foam cells get stuck, die, and spill their toxic guts, creating even more inflammation. This whole mess, lipids, immune cells, cellular debris, forms a plaque. It's not a clog sitting in the middle of the artery. It's a growing abscess within the arterial wall itself, pushing inward. The final catastrophic event, the heart attack or stroke, usually doesn't happen because the plaque grows so big that it blocks off the artery completely. That's a slow, rare process. The real danger is when the plaque becomes unstable. The relentless inflammation can weaken the thin cap covering the plaque, causing it to rupture. Your body, in its infinite wisdom, sees a rupture and does what it always does to stop bleeding. It forms a blood clot, a massive, instant blood clot right on top of the ruptured plaque. This is what blocks your artery in a matter of seconds and cuts off blood flow to your heart or brain. Boom. Game over. So, stop thinking about it as a slow-moving clog. It's a ticking time bomb of inflammation, and the real question is not if it will go off, but when. 3.2, the cholesterol shell game. Why bad cholesterol is the wrong target. So if it's all about these lipoprotein particles getting into your artery wall, the next question is obvious. Which ones? For decades, the medical establishment has been obsessed with LDL cholesterol, LDL-C, the so-called bad cholesterol. They measure the total amount of cholesterol carried by LDL particles and tell you if it's high or low. This is like trying to figure out how bad the traffic is by weighing all the passengers in all the cars. It's a stupid, indirect measurement that misses the point entirely. The amount of cholesterol inside the particles is not what drives the disease. The driver of the disease is the number of particles themselves. Attia stresses that the single most important metric for understanding your risk of atherosclerotic disease is the concentration of apolipoprotein B, ApoB, in your blood. Let me break this down. Every single one of these potentially artery-destroying particles, LDL, VLDL, IDL, LPA, has exactly one molecule of ApoB on its surface. Think of ApoB as the license plate. If you want to know how many cars are on the road, you don't weigh the passengers, you count the license plates. Counting ApoB particles gives you a direct measurement of the concentration of lipoprotein particles in your bloodstream. This number, the ApoB particle count, is the true indicator of your risk. The more particles you have, the more chances there are for one of them to penetrate your artery wall and kick off that inflammatory cascade. I once worked with a guy who was a marathon runner. Looked like a Greek god. His standard lipid panel was perfect. LDL-C was low, HDL-C, good cholesterol, was high. His doctor gave him a gold star. But he was curious, so he got an ApoB test. It was through the roof. It turned out he had a huge number of very small, dense LDL particles. Each one carried very little cholesterol, so his total LDL-C looked great. But the sheer number of particles was enormous. He was a heart attack waiting to happen, and the standard test completely missed it. This is happening to millions of people. They're getting a pat on the back from their doctor while their arteries are turning into a war zone. 3.3, the genetic wildcard, LPA, the risk factor your doctor isn't checking. If the ApoB story isn't enough to make you question your last checkup, let's talk about lipoprotein, or LPA. This is another type of lipoprotein particle that is, in Attia's words, ApoB on steroids. It's an LDL particle with an extra super sticky protein called apolipoprotein A attached to it. This makes it particularly nasty. It's more likely to cause inflammation. And worse, it has a structure that interferes with your body's ability to break down blood clots. So it's a double whammy. It promotes plaque formation and makes the resulting clots more dangerous. Here's the really messed up part. Your LPA level is almost entirely determined by your genes. Lifestyle changes, diet, exercise have virtually no effect on it. You either won the genetic lottery or you didn't. And about 1 in 5 people worldwide have dangerously high levels of LPA. That's a huge number of people walking around with a massive, unaddressed risk factor for heart disease. And why is it unaddressed? Because most doctors never test for it. It's not part of the standard lipid panel. It's considered an advanced test, reserved for people who already have a strong family history of early heart disease. This is completely backward. It's like waiting until a house is on fire to check if the smoke detectors work. Given how common and how dangerous high LPA is, Attia argues that every single person should be tested for it at least once in their life. If it's high, you can't lower it much, but you sure as hell can become hyper-aggressive about lowering all your other risk factors, especially your ApoB particle count. Knowing your LPA number changes the entire risk equation. Willfully ignoring it is medical malpractice on a population-wide scale. 3.4 Strategy over Tactics, Playing the Infinite Game. The central theme here is the mismatch in timescales. Atherosclerosis is a disease of decades. It starts in your childhood. It builds silently through your 20s, 30s, and 40s. But Medicine 2.0 only gets interested in your 50s or 60s when you finally present with symptoms. That's not a strategy. It's a surrender. The Medicine 3.0 approach is to intervene as early as possible. This doesn't mean putting every 20-year-old on statins. It means getting the right data early on. It means knowing your ApoB and LPA numbers by the time you're 30. If your numbers are great, fantastic. Keep an eye on them. If they're not, you have decades to bring them under control. You can use a combination of nutrition, exercise, and, if necessary, medication to drive your ApoB count down to the floor and keep it there for the rest of your life. Think about it like saving for retirement. You don't start at age 64 and hope for the best. You start in your 20s, making small, consistent contributions that compound over time. The same principle applies to preventing heart disease. The compounding interest here is the cumulative exposure of your artery walls to ApoB-containing particles over time. The longer you keep your ApoB low, the less time the disease has to develop. The goal is to die with some atherosclerosis, not from it. Everyone will develop some plaque if they live long enough. The game is to delay the onset and slow the progression so much that something else gets you first, decades down the line. This requires a shift from short-term tactics, like a 30-day diet, to a long-term personalized strategy based on your own specific risk factors. You have to decide if you want to be the person who passively waits for a diagnosis or the person who actively engineers their health to avoid one. One path leads to a cardiologist's office. The other leads to a longer, better life. The choice is pretty damn obvious. 4. Cancer, the unwanted guest that exploits your own biology. 4.1. Cancer is not a foreign invader, it's you, broken. Let's move on to the second horseman, cancer. Most people have a very specific and wrong idea about cancer. They see it as some alien invader, a malevolent entity that attacks from the outside. The reality is far more intimate and unsettling. Cancer is not an external enemy. Cancer is you. It's your own cells gone rogue. It's a civil war breaking out inside your body. Every single day, your body produces thousands of potentially cancerous cells. It's a normal byproduct of being alive. Your DNA gets damaged, a cell divides incorrectly, and suddenly you have a cell that has forgotten its original purpose. Most of the time, this isn't a problem. Your immune system has sophisticated surveillance mechanisms that identify these defective cells and eliminate them before they can cause trouble. It's a constant, silent war being waged at the cellular level, and for most of your life, your body wins. Cancer happens when this system breaks down. It's a two-part failure. First, a cell has to acquire a series of mutations that allow it to grow uncontrollably and ignore the signals telling it to die. Second, it has to learn how to evade the immune system. It develops a cloaking device, convincing the body's defenders that it's just a normal, friendly cell. It's the ultimate betrayal. The cancer cell uses the body's own life-sustaining processes, its blood supply, its nutrients, to fuel its own destructive growth. It's a parasite that wears your face. This understanding is critical because it changes the entire strategic landscape. If cancer were a simple foreign invader, we could just develop a single weapon to kill it. But because it's a distorted version of our own biology, it's an incredibly complex and adaptable enemy. It's like trying to fight an army where every soldier looks exactly like one of your own. 4.2. The metabolic link, how you're feeding your own downfall. So what allows this breakdown to happen? While a lot of it comes down to bad luck and genetic predispositions, there's a huge piece of the puzzle that we've been ignoring: metabolism. The metabolic dysfunction that we talked about as a horseman in its own right is also the primary fertilizer for cancer. Here's the connection. Many cancer cells are metabolically inflexible. They are addicted to glucose. While your healthy cells can happily burn fat or ketones for energy, many tumors are sugar junkies. They have a voracious appetite for glucose and use it to fuel their rapid, chaotic growth. This is the basis of a PET scan, by the way. Doctors inject you with radioactive glucose, and the cancer cells light up like a Christmas tree because they suck it up so much faster than healthy tissue. This creates a terrifying link between your diet and your cancer risk. If you are living in a state of chronic high blood sugar and high insulin, the hallmark of metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance, you are essentially creating the perfect feeding ground for cancer. You are rolling out the welcome mat and setting a banquet for any rogue cells that might be lurking in your body. High insulin levels don't just signal your body to store fat. They also act as a powerful growth signal for cells, including cancer cells. This is a truth that makes people deeply uncomfortable. No one wants to hear that their lifestyle choices could be actively promoting cancer. I once had a conversation with a woman who was furious that her oncologist never once mentioned diet. She'd gone through brutal rounds of chemo and radiation, and the entire time she was drinking sugary nutritional shakes provided by the hospital. She was literally being advised to chug the one thing her cancer craved most. It's not malice, it's ignorance. The medical system is so siloed that the oncologists don't talk to the endocrinologists. They're all fighting their own little battles while completely missing the bigger war. 4.3. Beyond early detection, the case for early prevention. The current strategy for fighting cancer is almost entirely focused on early detection. We have mammograms, colonoscopies, PSA tests, all designed to find cancer after it has already formed, but hopefully before it has spread. And don't get me wrong, early detection is way better than late detection. It saves lives, but it's still a reactive strategy. It's still waiting for the fire to start before you look for the smoke. Attia argues for a more radical approach: early prevention. This is the core of Medicine 3.0. It's about creating an internal environment where it is incredibly difficult for cancer to ever get a foothold in the first place. If we know that metabolic dysfunction is a key enabler of cancer, then the most powerful anti-cancer tool we have is to maintain impeccable metabolic health. This means keeping your blood glucose low and stable, keeping your insulin levels down, and avoiding the chronic inflammation that comes with metabolic syndrome. This isn't about some miracle cancer-fighting diet. It's about basic biological housekeeping. It's about not giving the enemy the ammunition it needs. This is where tactics like nutritional ketosis, fasting, and specific exercise protocols come into play. They are not cures for cancer. They are tools to make your body a less hospitable host. Think of it this way: screening is like having a really good security guard at the door of your bank. Prevention is like designing the entire town so that no one ever thinks to rob a bank in the first place. One is a tactic, the other is a strategy. The other crucial part of the prevention strategy is what Attia calls intelligent screening. The current one-size-fits-all screening guidelines are idiotic. A 40-year-old woman with dense breasts and a family history of cancer should not be on the same mammogram schedule as a 40-year-old with none of those risk factors. We now have tools like liquid biopsies, blood tests that can detect tiny fragments of tumor DNA that could revolutionize how we screen for cancer. But our system is too slow and too conservative to adopt them widely. We are still using last-century technology to fight a 21st-century war. The hard truth is that we are all playing a numbers game with cancer. The longer you live, the higher the probability that one of your cells will go rogue. You can't change that fundamental reality, but you can stack the deck in your favor. You can stop providing the fuel. You can enhance your body's own surveillance systems through exercise and proper sleep. You can be smarter about how and when you screen, or you can just cross your fingers and hope for the best. Good luck with that strategy. 5. The brain's slow fade. Fighting the specter of neurodegeneration. 5.1 Alzheimer's isn't senioritis, it's a decades-long heist. Let's talk about the third horseman, and honestly, the one that scares people the most, neurodegenerative disease. This is the category that includes Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and other conditions that steal your mind, your personality, and your very self. Losing your physical abilities is bad enough. Losing your mind is a unique kind of hell. It's the ultimate loss of agency. The poster child for this horror show is Alzheimer's disease. And just like with heart disease and cancer, the way we think about it is fundamentally flawed. People see it as a disease of old age, something that just happens when you get wrinkly. This is dangerously naive. Alzheimer's is a disease of midlife. The pathological process, the accumulation of amyloid plaques and tau tangles in the brain, begins as much as 20 or 30 years before the first noticeable symptom of memory loss. Your brain is being robbed, slowly and silently, for decades. By the time you can't find your keys, the heist is already mostly complete. This long, silent runway is both terrifying and empowering. It's terrifying because it means that a seemingly healthy 50-year-old could already have a brain riddled with the early signs of Alzheimer's. But it's empowering because it gives us a massive window for intervention. If we can identify the risk factors and the underlying drivers of the disease, we have decades to do something about them. The problem, once again, is Medicine 2.0. The entire medical infrastructure for Alzheimer's is built around treating patients who are already symptomatic. But there is not a single drug on the planet that can reverse significant cognitive decline once it has set in. Not one. The best they can do is slightly slow the progression, which is like putting a speed bump in front of a freight train. It's a pathetic, losing battle. The only winning move is not to play. The only way to cure Alzheimer's is to prevent it from ever taking hold. 5.2 Type 3 diabetes, the brain on sugar. So what drives this slow-motion brain decay? The answer, depressingly, should be starting to sound familiar. A huge driver is metabolic health. In fact, the link is so strong that some researchers have started calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes, or diabetes of the brain. Here's why. Just like other cells in your body, your brain cells need energy to function, and a brain that is chronically exposed to high levels of glucose and insulin becomes insulin resistant, just like a muscle or liver cell. When your neurons become insulin resistant, they lose their ability to efficiently take up and use glucose, their primary fuel source. They begin to starve. An Alzheimer's brain is, in many ways, an energy-starved brain. This chronic energy crisis leads to inflammation, oxidative stress, and ultimately, cell death. The plaques and tangles might be the visible evidence of the crime, but the metabolic dysfunction is the motive and the means. This explains why people with type 2 diabetes have a dramatically higher risk of developing Alzheimer's. Their bodies are already swimming in a sea of glucose and insulin. Their brains are simply the next victim in a long line of metabolically damaged organs. But you don't need a full-blown diabetes diagnosis to be at risk. Even mild insulin resistance, the kind that Attia found in himself when he was supposedly at his physical peak, is a major risk factor. The implication here is profound and deeply personal. The same dietary and lifestyle choices that are paving the way for your heart attack are also paving the way for your dementia. The donut you eat today isn't just spiking your blood sugar, it's contributing to the slow starvation of your future brain. I remember talking to a neurologist who told me, I can look at a patient's brain scan and tell you with reasonable certainty what their diet has been like for the last 20 years. That should stop you in your tracks. Your daily habits are being etched into the very structure of your brain. 5.3 A multi-pronged defense, beyond just diet. While fixing your metabolic health is arguably the single most important thing you can do to protect your brain, it's not the only piece of the puzzle. Preventing neurodegeneration requires a multi-pronged assault. Attia lays out several other critical domains. First is exercise. Physical activity is like a miracle drug for the brain. It improves blood flow, reduces inflammation, and stimulates the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which is basically fertilizer for your neurons. It helps them grow, connect, and resist damage. Both aerobic exercise for cardiovascular health and blood flow, and strength training for maintaining muscle mass and improving glucose disposal are non-negotiable. Second is sleep. Sleep is your brain's janitorial service. During deep sleep, your brain activates something called the glymphatic system, which flushes out metabolic waste products that accumulate during the day, including amyloid beta. If you are consistently shortchanging your sleep, you are literally preventing your brain from taking out the trash. That trash builds up night after night, year after year, contributing directly to the pathology of Alzheimer's. Third is managing stress. Chronic stress and the resulting high levels of the hormone cortisol is toxic to the brain, particularly the B hippocampus, a region critical for memory. Finding ways to manage stress, meditation, time in nature, social connection is not a luxury. It is a core component of any serious brain health strategy. Finally, there's the genetic component. The most well-known genetic risk factor for Alzheimer's is the ApoE4 gene. Having one copy of this gene increases your risk several-fold. Having two copies, one from each parent, increases it by as much as 12-fold. Just like with LPA for heart disease, this is a genetic test everyone should consider getting. It's not a death sentence. I know people with two copies of ApoE4 who are sharp as a tack in their 80s. But it is a call to action. It means you don't have the same margin for error as everyone else. If you are an ApoE4 carrier, every other aspect of this prevention strategy, metabolic health, exercise, sleep, becomes that much more critical. It tells you that you have to be the CEO of your own health because your genetics aren't going to bail you out. 6. The overlooked killer, the central role of metabolic dysfunction. 6.1. The common thread, tying it all together. We've now walked through the first three horsemen: heart disease, cancer, and neurodegeneration. And if you've been paying attention, you've noticed a recurring villain showing up in every story. This is the fourth horseman, metabolic dysfunction, and it's arguably the most important of them all. It's not just a separate disease. It's the rich, fertile soil in which the other three horsemen plant their seeds. It's the great enabler. Metabolic dysfunction is a catch-all term for a spectrum of conditions, with the most prominent being insulin resistance. This is the state where your cells, particularly in your muscles, liver, and fat tissue, stop responding effectively to the hormone insulin. Your pancreas, trying to get the message through, responds by pumping out more and more insulin. This leads to a state of chronic high insulin levels, or hyperinsulinemia. Eventually, the pancreas can't keep up, and your blood glucose levels start to rise. This entire cascade, from insulin resistance to hyperinsulinemia to full-blown type 2 diabetes, is what we mean by metabolic dysfunction. Here's the blunt truth. The vast majority of adults in the Western world are metabolically unhealthy. The numbers are staggering. Some estimates suggest that nearly 90% of American adults have at least one marker of metabolic dysfunction. Most of them have no idea. They might be a little overweight, but they feel fine. They don't have a disease yet, so their doctor tells them everything is normal. But under the surface, the metabolic machinery is breaking down, creating the perfect conditions for a future health catastrophe. Attia's personal story is the perfect illustration. He was a high-performance athlete, lean and fit by every conventional measure. Yet he was severely insulin resistant. This is a critical point. You cannot judge your metabolic health by your weight or your appearance. The skinny fat phenomenon is real. You can be thin on the outside, fat on the inside, a condition called TOFI, with dangerous visceral fat wrapped around your organs, spewing out inflammatory signals and driving insulin resistance. The bathroom scale is a liar. It tells you nothing about your metabolic reality. 6.2, the three-legged stool of nutrition, a framework for sanity. So if metabolic health is the linchpin, how the hell do we fix it? This brings us to the minefield of nutrition. The world is full of self-proclaimed diet gurus, each peddling their own brand of salvation, from carnivore to vegan and everything in between. It's a confusing, contradictory mess designed to sell books and supplements, not to make you healthy. Attia cuts through this noise by proposing a simple, pragmatic framework. Instead of focusing on a specific named diet, he argues that any effective nutritional strategy must address three key levers. 1. Caloric restriction, CR, how much you eat. 2. Dietary restriction, DR, what you eat or don't eat. 3. Time restriction, TR, when you eat. That's it. Every single diet on the planet is some combination of these three levers. A ketogenic diet is a form of dietary restriction, restricting carbohydrates. Intermittent fasting is a form of time restriction. A low-fat diet is another form of DR. The eat less, move more mantra is a crude form of caloric restriction. The beauty of this framework is that it's agnostic. It doesn't tell you that one approach is morally superior to another. It just gives you a set of tools. Your job is to figure out which combination of these tools works best for you, for your genetics, your lifestyle, your preferences, and your specific metabolic goals. The goal is not to follow a dogma. The goal is to achieve an outcome. And for longevity, the primary outcome is metabolic health, low and stable blood glucose, low insulin, and the ability to easily switch between burning glucose and burning fat for fuel, i.e., metabolic flexibility. For some people, a continuous state of mild caloric restriction might be the most sustainable path. For others, like Attia himself, a more aggressive approach using dietary restriction, like a ketogenic diet, and time restriction, fasting, might be necessary to reverse significant insulin resistance. There is no one-size-fits-all answer. The only wrong answer is to do nothing and pretend that the standard American diet isn't a slow-acting poison. 6.3 Beyond Food, the non-negotiable role of exercise. While nutrition is the primary lever for correcting metabolic dysfunction, it's not the only one. Exercise is the other half of the equation, and it is absolutely non-negotiable. You cannot out-diet a sedentary lifestyle, at least not if you want to be a vibrant, functional human being in your later years. Exercise impacts metabolic health in ways that nutrition alone simply cannot. When you perform intense exercise, particularly strength training, your muscles can take up glucose from the bloodstream without needing insulin. This is a biological superpower. It provides a non-pancreatic dependent way to clear glucose from your blood, giving your overworked pancreas a much-needed break. Your muscles are giant glucose sponges, and the more muscle mass you have and the more you use it, the more metabolically healthy you will be. This is why Attia is so obsessed with building and maintaining muscle mass as you age. The loss of muscle mass, sarcopenia, is one of the key drivers of frailty and metabolic decline in older adults. From a longevity perspective, your muscle is a metabolic organ. It's your glucose disposal reservoir. Letting it waste away is a recipe for disaster. This leads to a simple but profound conclusion. The foundation of a long and healthy life is a two-part strategy. First, you must use some combination of caloric, dietary, and time restriction to control your energy intake and avoid overwhelming your metabolic system. Second, you must use exercise, especially strength training, to build the largest possible sink for that energy to go into. It's a push and pull system. Manage the input with nutrition and maximize the output and disposal with exercise. If you get those two things right, you have gone a massive way toward disarming all four horsemen at once. It's the closest thing we have to a unified field theory of health span. 7. Exercise, the most powerful longevity drug. 7.1. Stop thinking about working out and start training for life. If there's one intervention that comes closest to a panacea in the book, it's exercise. But the way most people approach it is completely backward. They work out. They go to the gym to burn calories, to punish themselves for the donut they ate, or to chase some short-term aesthetic goal. This is a fragile, motivation-based model that almost always fails in the long run. It's also a tragic waste of the most potent longevity tool we possess. Attia argues for a complete reframing. We need to stop working out and start training. What's the difference? Working out is random and tactical. Training is systematic and strategic. Training has a long-term goal. And for the purpose of longevity, the goal is not to have six-pack abs at 30. The goal is to be a badass 90-year-old. The goal is to avoid being the frail, weak person who breaks a hip after a minor fall and never recovers. This is where the concept of the centenarian decathlon comes in. It's a mental exercise. Sit down and list the 10 most important physical tasks you want to be able to do in the last decade of your life. These aren't fantasy goals like running a marathon. They are deeply personal and practical. Maybe it's getting up off the floor unassisted. Maybe it's carrying your own groceries up a flight of stairs. Maybe it's lifting your great-grandchild into the air. Maybe it's being able to hike your favorite trail or travel without being a burden on your family. Once you have your list, the next step is to backcast. If you want to be able to lift a 30-pound suitcase into an overhead bin at age 90, what does that require in terms of strength and stability? Given the predictable decline in strength that comes with age, what level of strength do you need to have at age 80, 70, and 60 to ensure you still have that capacity at 90? Suddenly, your deadlift in the gym today is not about ego. It's a deposit into your functional strength retirement account. It has a purpose. This changes everything. It transforms exercise from a chore into a core part of your personal identity and long-term survival strategy. 7.2, the 4 pillars of a complete training program. So what does a strategic training program actually look like? Attia breaks it down into 4 essential, non-negotiable pillars. If you neglect any one of these, your physical structure will eventually fail. Pillar 1, strength. This is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Strength is not about bodybuilding. It's about the ability to exert force against resistance. This is what allows you to get out of a chair, climb stairs, and catch yourself when you stumble. As you age, you naturally lose muscle mass and strength, sarcopenia. The only way to combat this is through progressive resistance training. Attia emphasizes functional, compound movements that mimic real-life activities: squatting, hinging, like a deadlift, pushing, and pulling. The goal is to build the highest possible peak of strength in your 40s and 50s so that the inevitable age-related decline starts from a much higher point. Pillar 2, stability. This is the unsung hero of physical function. Stability is about your brain's ability to control your body. It's about core strength, balance, and proprioception, your sense of where your body is in space. You can be incredibly strong, but if you're not stable, you're just an accident waiting to happen. A strong person with poor stability is like a powerful cannon mounted on a canoe. Stability is what translates your strength into controlled, effective movement. It's what keeps you from falling over. And falls are a catastrophic event for older adults, often triggering a rapid, irreversible decline. Training for stability involves exercises that challenge your balance and force your small, stabilizing muscles to fire. Pillar 3, aerobic efficiency, Zone 2. This pillar is about building your metabolic engine. Zone 2 cardio refers to low-intensity, steady-state exercise where you can still hold a conversation. Think of a brisk walk, a light jog, or cycling. The physiological goal of Zone 2 training is to improve your mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are the power plants in your cells. Training them to become more numerous and more efficient at burning fat for fuel is the key to aerobic fitness and metabolic flexibility. It builds your base. Attia is religious about this, advocating for 3 to 4 hours of Zone 2 exercise per week. It's not sexy, it's not glamorous, but it's the bedrock of endurance and metabolic health. Pillar 4, peak aerobic capacity, VO2 max. This is the other side of the cardio coin. VO2 max is a measure of the maximum amount of oxygen your body can utilize during intense exercise. It is one of the most powerful predictors of all-cause mortality. A higher VO2 max is associated with a dramatically lower risk of dying from pretty much anything. While Zone 2 builds your base, you need high-intensity interval training to push the ceiling of your VO2 max. This involves short, all-out bursts of effort followed by recovery. It's uncomfortable. It sucks. But it is an incredibly potent signal for your heart, lungs, and muscles to adapt and become more powerful. Doing this once or twice a week is a non-negotiable part of the program. These 4 pillars are not a menu you can pick and choose from. They are an integrated system. Your stability allows you to express your strength safely. Your strength powers your high-intensity efforts. And your aerobic base allows you to recover from those efforts and sustain activity for long periods. A truly robust and resilient body is built on all 4. 8. Sleep, the unsung pillar of healthspan. 8.1. The delusion of the sleepless elite. In our burnout-obsessed culture, sleep deprivation is often worn as a badge of honor. People boast about how little they sleep, as if it's a sign of their importance or work ethic. This is, to put it bluntly, one of the dumbest and most self-destructive forms of machismo imaginable. Attia is merciless in his critique of this mindset. Sacrificing sleep is not a sign of strength, it's a sign of profound ignorance about your own biology. Here's the hard truth. Sleep is not a passive state of rest. It is an active, critical biological process during which your body and brain perform essential maintenance tasks that cannot happen when you are awake. Every single aspect of your health, your immune function, your hormonal balance, your metabolic health, your cognitive performance, your emotional regulation, is directly tied to the quality and quantity of your sleep. When you consistently skimp on sleep, you are systematically dismantling your own health. Just one night of poor sleep can temporarily induce a state of insulin resistance, comparable to that of a person with type 2 diabetes. Chronic sleep deprivation is linked to a higher risk of all four horsemen. It promotes inflammation and high blood pressure, heart disease, impairs immune surveillance, cancer, disrupts the clearance of amyloid plaques, Alzheimer's, and wrecks your metabolic health. I remember a period in my own life during medical residency where sleeping more than 4 hours a night was a luxury. I thought I was a hero, saving lives on no sleep. The reality is, I was a danger to my patients and myself. My decision-making was impaired, my mood was trash, and I was physically and mentally falling apart. The idea that you can hack your sleep and get by on less is a fantasy peddled by charlatans. A tiny fraction of the population has a genuine genetic mutation that allows them to thrive on less sleep, but the odds are astronomical that you are one of them. For the rest of us mortals, treating sleep as a non-negotiable priority is fundamental to any longevity strategy. 8.2. The architecture of sleep. It's not just about duration. So what does good sleep actually mean? It's not just about spending 8 hours in bed. You can do that and still wake up feeling like garbage if the quality of your sleep is poor. Good sleep has a specific architecture, cycling through different stages, primarily deep sleep, also known as slow-wave sleep and REM sleep. Both are critical, but they do different things. Deep sleep is primarily for physical restoration. This is when your body releases growth hormone, repairs tissues, and strengthens your immune system. It's the body's repair shop. It tends to occur more in the first half of the night. REM, rapid eye movement sleep, on the other hand, is for mental and emotional restoration. This is when your brain consolidates memories, processes emotions, and engages in creative problem solving. It's often when you have your most vivid dreams. REM sleep tends to dominate the later part of the night. If your sleep is constantly being fragmented by things like alcohol, stress, or a poor sleep environment, you may not be getting enough of these crucial stages, even if you're in bed for 8 hours. You can get a rough estimate of your sleep stages using consumer wearables like an Oura Ring or a Whoop strap. While they aren't as accurate as a clinical sleep study, polysomnography, Attia finds them directionally useful for tracking trends and seeing how different behaviors impact your sleep quality. Seeing the data can be a powerful motivator. When you see that a couple of glasses of wine completely obliterated your REM sleep, it makes it a lot harder to justify that second glass. 8.3. The art of sleep hygiene, engineering your night. Given the profound importance of sleep, it's not something you can just leave to chance. You need to actively engineer your environment and your behavior to promote high-quality sleep. This is the practice of sleep hygiene, and it's not about being fussy. It's about respecting your own biology. Attia lays out a comprehensive toolkit of strategies. The goal is to send your brain powerful signals that it's time to wind down and initiate sleep. These include light management. This is probably the most important one. Your brain's master clock is exquisitely sensitive to light. Exposure to bright light, especially blue light from screens, in the hours before bed can suppress the release of melatonin, your primary sleep-promoting hormone. The solution? Dim the lights in your house. Use blue light blocking glasses, and for God's sake, get off your phone, tablet, and computer at least an hour before bed. Conversely, getting bright sunlight exposure first thing in the morning helps to anchor your circadian rhythm and makes it easier to fall asleep that night. Temperature control. Your body temperature needs to drop by a couple of degrees to initiate and maintain sleep. Sleeping in a cold room around 65 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 degrees Celsius is one of the most powerful sleep aids there is. Taking a hot bath or shower before bed can also help, as it causes your blood vessels to dilate, which then allows your body to radiate heat more effectively and cool down faster once you get out. Managing inputs. What you put into your body matters. Caffeine has a long half-life and can disrupt sleep even if you drink it in the early afternoon. Alcohol is another major sleep disruptor. It might help you fall asleep faster, but it wrecks the quality of your sleep, particularly REM sleep. Even eating a large meal too close to bedtime can interfere with sleep as your body works to digest it. Creating a wind-down routine. You can't go from 100 miles per hour to 0 in 5 minutes. You need to create a buffer zone between your busy day and sleep. This could involve reading a physical book, not on a screen, listening to calming music, meditating, or gentle stretching. The specific activity doesn't matter as much as the consistency. It's about creating a ritual that signals to your brain that the day is over. The bottom line is that sleep isn't a luxury or a sign of weakness. It's a fundamental biological necessity and one of the most powerful performance-enhancing, disease-preventing tools you have at your disposal. If you're serious about living a long, healthy life, you have to get serious about your sleep. Period. 9. Emotional health. The fifth and most neglected horseman. 9.1. The missing piece of the longevity puzzle. So far, we've talked about the big 4 physical killers: heart disease, cancer, neurodegeneration, and metabolic dysfunction. We've laid out a comprehensive, science-backed strategy for fighting them with nutrition, exercise, and sleep. If you do all of that, you'll be in the top percentile of physical health. But Attia makes a crucial and deeply personal point towards the end of the book. None of it matters if you're emotionally miserable. What's the point of engineering a perfectly healthy body if the mind inside it is a raging dumpster fire of anxiety, trauma, and despair? This is where he introduces what could be considered the unofficial fifth horseman: emotional health. This is the art part of the science and art of longevity. It's the part that often gets ignored by data-driven, optimization-obsessed people, a group Attia readily includes himself in. But he argues, based on his own brutal experience, that neglecting your emotional well-being is just as dangerous as neglecting your physical health. In fact, the two are inextricably linked. Chronic emotional distress is not just some fuzzy, subjective feeling. It has profound, measurable physiological consequences. It jacks up your cortisol and other stress hormones, which drives inflammation, promotes insulin resistance, and suppresses your immune system. It directly fuels the other 4 horsemen. A life filled with unresolved trauma, broken relationships, and a lack of purpose is a life that is biologically primed for chronic disease. Attia shares his own story with raw vulnerability. For years, he was the ultimate achiever. He was driven, successful, and externally had it all. Internally, he was a wreck. He was plagued by perfectionism, a relentless drive for external validation, and a deep-seated fear of failure. It made him a very effective surgeon and athlete, but a terrible husband, father, and friend. It was a coping mechanism born from childhood trauma, and it almost cost him everything he actually cared about. He had optimized his body for longevity, but had built a life that he didn't even want to live long in. 9.2. Your inner critic is not a motivator. It's an abuser. The journey into understanding his own emotional brokenness led Attia to intensive therapy, including specialized treatments for trauma. One of the key realizations was that his relentless drive, the voice in his head that was constantly pushing him to be better, was not a healthy motivator. It was an echo of past trauma, an inner critic that could never be satisfied. It was a source of immense suffering. Many high achievers have this same problem. They mistake their inner critic for a coach. They think the constant self-flagellation is what makes them successful. But it's a toxic relationship. It's like having an abusive partner living inside your head. It might get you short-term results, but the long-term cost is immense. It creates a life devoid of joy, peace, and genuine connection. The work of emotional health, then, is not about finding more happiness. Happiness is a fleeting emotion, a garbage goal. The real work is about developing a different relationship with yourself. It's about learning to untangle your sense of self-worth from your external accomplishments. It's about cultivating self-compassion, which is not the same as self-pity. It's about being able to look at your own flaws and failures without falling into a shame spiral. This is hard, messy work. It doesn't have clean data points like your ApoB count or your VO2 max. It requires a different kind of courage, the courage to be vulnerable, to look at the darkest parts of yourself, and to ask for help. It means admitting that you don't have all the answers, and that maybe, just maybe, the very tools that made you successful in one area of your life are the same ones that are destroying you in another. My own journey through the crucible of medical training left me with a similar set of scars. I learned to compartmentalize and suppress emotions to survive. It took years of intentional work to unlearn those patterns and realize that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, but the only path to real strength and connection. 9.3. The ROI of relationships and purpose. So what does a healthy emotional life look like? It's not about being blissfully happy all the time. It's about resilience. It's about having the tools to navigate the inevitable suffering and setbacks of life without being completely derailed. Attia points to two key pillars of emotional well-being that have a huge return on investment for longevity: social connection and a sense of purpose. The data on social connection is overwhelming. People with strong, supportive relationships live longer, healthier lives. Loneliness and social isolation are as big a risk factor for mortality as smoking or obesity. We are a social species. We are hardwired for connection. A life spent in isolation, even if you have perfect metabolic health, is a biologically impoverished life. This means actively investing time and energy in your relationships with your partner, your family, and your friends. It's not something that just happens. It requires work, just like going to the gym. The other pillar is purpose. This is the why that gets you out of bed in the morning. It doesn't have to be some grand world-changing mission. It can be found in your work, in your family, in your community, or in a creative pursuit. It's the feeling that your life has meaning and direction beyond your own selfish concerns. A life without purpose is a life adrift, and that aimlessness is a potent source of existential dread and despair. Ultimately, the art of longevity is about integration. It's about recognizing that you are not just a collection of biological markers. You are a whole person. A long life is a worthless prize if it's not also a good life. The ultimate goal of Medicine 3.0 is not just to add years to your life, but to add life to your years. And that requires paying as much attention to the health of your mind and your spirit as you do to the health of your arteries and your cells. It's the hardest work there is, but it's also the only work that truly matters. 10. Building your strategy, from theory to action. 10.1. Escaping the inertia of medicine, 2.0. All right, we've covered a ton of ground. We've dissected the 4 horsemen, explored the foundational pillars of exercise, nutrition, sleep, and emotional health. The theory is clear. Now comes the hard part, putting it all into practice. How do you actually do this? How do you build your own personalized Medicine 3.0 strategy in a world that is still stuck in the reactive disease care model of Medicine 2.0? The first and most significant hurdle is inertia. The entire healthcare system is designed to discourage the kind of proactive, preventative approach this book advocates for. Your doctor is overwhelmed, has 15 minutes for your appointment, and is trained to look for established disease, not future risk. Your insurance company doesn't want to pay for advanced tests like ApoB or LPA on a healthy person. The food environment is a minefield of processed junk. The culture glorifies being busy and sleep-deprived. The system is working against you. This means you have to be the CEO of your own health. You cannot be a passive recipient of care. You have to be the driving force. This is a massive mindset shift for most people. It means you have to educate yourself. It means you have to be willing to ask your doctor for specific tests and have a clear rationale for why you want them. It might even mean finding a new doctor who is aligned with this forward-thinking approach. I've seen this play out countless times. A patient goes to their doctor, armed with information from the book, and asks for an ApoB test. The doctor says, "Your LDL is fine, you don't need that." The patient has a choice. They can either give up and accept the status quo, or they can push back, or find another way to get the test done. The ones who succeed in this game are the ones who refuse to take no for an answer when it comes to their own health data. They understand that no one is going to care more about their long-term well-being than they do. 10.2, the 4-step tactical plan. So what does being the CEO of your health actually look like in practice? Attia provides a tactical framework for getting started. It's a continuous, iterative process, not a one-time fix. Step 1, assess. You can't navigate without a map. The first step is to gather as much data as you can about your current state of health. This goes way beyond the standard checkup. This means getting a comprehensive set of blood tests to understand your metabolic health, fasting insulin, glucose, HbA1c, your cardiovascular risk, ApoB, LPA, and your levels of chronic inflammation, HSCRP. It means assessing your body composition. DEXA scan is the gold standard to understand your muscle mass and visceral fat. It means testing your VO2 max and your functional strength. The goal is to create a detailed, objective baseline of where you are right now. Step 2, define your objectives. Based on your assessment, you can start to set clear, long-term goals. This is where the centenarian decathlon comes in. What do you want your life to look like in your final decades? What are the physical and cognitive capabilities you refuse to live without? Your objectives should also be informed by your data. If your ApoB is high, a primary objective is to drive it down aggressively. If your VO2 max is in the toilet, a key objective is to raise it. These objectives give your strategy direction. Step 3, apply interventions. This is where you start pulling the levers of nutrition, exercise, sleep, and if necessary, pharmacology. The specific interventions you choose should be tailored to your objectives and your personal context. For example, if your main goal is to reverse insulin resistance, you might experiment with time-restricted eating or a low-carbohydrate diet. You'll design an exercise program based on the 4 pillars, with a particular emphasis on addressing your weakest link, whether that's strength, stability, or aerobic capacity. You will systematically improve your sleep hygiene. This is the doing phase. Step 4, monitor and iterate. A strategy is not a static document. It's a living thing. The final step is to continuously monitor your progress and adjust your tactics accordingly. This means retesting your key biomarkers periodically to see if your interventions are working. Are your glucose and insulin levels improving? Is your ApoB coming down? Is your VO2 max going up? The data gives you feedback. If something isn't working, you don't just give up. You iterate. You try a different approach. Maybe a ketogenic diet is too restrictive for you to stick with long term. Fine. Try a different form of dietary restriction. The goal is not perfection. It's relentless, data-driven iteration. It's a constant cycle of assess, aim, act, and adjust. 10.3, the mindset of the infinite player. Ultimately, adopting the Medicine 3.0 philosophy is about changing the game you are playing. Medicine 2.0 is a finite game. It's a series of short-term battles against specific diseases with a clear endpoint. You're either cured or you're dead. It's about winning battles. Medicine 3.0 is an infinite game. The goal is not to win, because there is no finish line. The goal is to keep playing, to stay in the game for as long as possible with the highest possible quality of life. It's about building a system of health that is resilient and adaptable, one that can handle the inevitable challenges and setbacks that life will throw at you. This requires a different mindset. It requires patience, because the results play out over decades, not days. It requires humility, because you will make mistakes and have to change course. It requires curiosity, because the science is constantly evolving. And most of all, it requires agency. It requires you to accept that your health is your responsibility. The hard truth at the center of this book is that there are no hacks. There are no magic pills. There is only the slow, unglamorous, day-in, day-out work of building a robust and resilient life. It's a choice. You can drift along, outsourcing your health to a broken system and hoping for the best. Or you can decide to become an active participant in your own story. You can choose to play the infinite game. One path is easy, the other is meaningful. Choose your struggle. Main thesis of the author. This section crystallizes the core arguments and foundational principles presented by Peter Attia in Outlive. It serves as a concentrated distillation of the book's primary theses, which collectively form the blueprint for the Medicine 3.0 philosophy. 1. The central goal is to maximize health span, not just lifespan. The primary failure of modern medicine, Medicine 2.0, is its singular focus on extending life without regard for the quality of that life. It excels at preventing quick deaths, but fails catastrophically at preventing the long, slow decline from chronic disease that characterizes the final 10 to 20 years for most people. The author argues for a radical shift in focus towards health span, the period of life spent in good health, free from disability and disease. The ultimate objective is not merely to live longer, but to live better, maintaining physical function and cognitive vitality for as long as possible, and to compress the period of decline into the shortest possible window at the very end of life. This requires a proactive, preventative strategy, not a reactive disease management one. Number 2, chronic diseases begin decades before they are diagnosed. The 4 Horsemen, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease, and metabolic dysfunction, are not acute events. They are the end result of pathological processes that unfold over decades. By the time a patient is symptomatic and receives a diagnosis, the disease is already in an advanced stage, making it far more difficult, if not impossible, to reverse. The entire strategy of Medicine 3.0 is predicated on this temporal mismatch. The only logical approach is to intervene as early as possible, identifying and mitigating risk factors in one's 30s, 40s, and 50s to prevent the disease from ever gaining a significant foothold. This means shifting from a model of early detection to one of true prevention. Number 3, metabolic dysfunction is the linchpin of chronic disease. While the 4 Horsemen are distinct in their ultimate manifestation, they are all profoundly influenced by a common underlying factor: poor metabolic health, primarily driven by insulin resistance. A state of chronic hyperinsulinemia and glucose intolerance creates a systemic environment of inflammation and cellular stress that fertilizes the growth of all major chronic diseases. It provides the fuel for many cancers, drives the inflammatory cascade of atherosclerosis, and contributes to the energy crisis in the brain that leads to Alzheimer's. Therefore, achieving and maintaining optimal metabolic health is the single most powerful lever one can pull to reduce the risk of all 4 Horsemen simultaneously. This makes metrics like fasting insulin and glucose stability far more important than conventional markers like weight or BMI. 4. Exercise is the most potent longevity drug we have. If there is one intervention with panacea-like effects on health span, it is exercise. Its benefits are broad and systemic, impacting every pillar of health. The author advocates for a strategic approach to training, not just working out, that is built on 4 essential pillars: strength, the foundation of function and a hedge against sarcopenia; stability, the key to translating strength into controlled movement and preventing injury, especially from falls; aerobic efficiency, Zone 2 training to build mitochondrial function and metabolic flexibility; and peak aerobic capacity, VO2 max, a powerful predictor of all-cause mortality. Neglecting any of these pillars leaves a critical vulnerability in one's physical resilience. The goal of training should be reverse-engineered from the desired physical capabilities in one's final decade, the centenarian decathlon. We must use more precise, forward-looking diagnostic tools. The standard diagnostic tools of Medicine 2.0 are inadequate for a preventative strategy because they are designed to spot existing disease, not future risk. Attia argues for the systematic use of more advanced predictive diagnostics. For heart disease, this means focusing on the concentration of apolipoprotein B, ApoB particles, which is a direct measure of the atherogenic particle burden, rather than the misleading LDL-C. It also means everyone should know their LPA status, a major genetic risk factor. For cancer, it means moving toward more intelligent, personalized screening and leveraging emerging technologies like liquid biopsies. For metabolic health, it means tracking fasting insulin, not just glucose. The strategy is to get the right data early to enable a personalized and aggressive risk mitigation strategy over a long time horizon. Number 6. Emotional health is a non-negotiable component of physical health. A purely physiological approach to longevity is incomplete and ultimately self-defeating. Emotional suffering, stemming from unresolved trauma, chronic stress, broken relationships, or a lack of purpose, is not merely a psychological issue. It is a physiological one. It drives chronic inflammation, dysregulates the stress hormone axis, and directly contributes to the development of the four horsemen. Attia argues, from his own personal experience, that emotional health must be treated with the same rigor and seriousness as physical health. This involves difficult inner work to develop self-awareness, heal past traumas, and cultivate resilience. The pillars of this fifth horseman are strong social connection and a durable sense of purpose, which are powerful buffers against the biological ravages of distress. A long life is not a desirable goal unless it is also a meaningful and emotionally fulfilling one. 7. The patient must become the CEO of their own health. The current healthcare system is not designed to support a proactive, long-term health span strategy. Therefore, the individual must transition from being a passive recipient of medical care to being the active, empowered owner of their own health project. This requires a fundamental mindset shift toward agency and personal responsibility. It involves self-education, advocating for one's own needs within the medical system, demanding the right data, and being willing to engage in a continuous, iterative process of assessment, intervention, and monitoring. There are no simple hacks or shortcuts. There is only the commitment to playing the infinite game of health, making consistent, deliberate choices day after day, decade after decade. That's it. I'm done. Thank you.